Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim, he's Nate. This is a Cash Killing AC College Football blog. First of all, tomorrow night, check out our live show. All the details are on the main video on our channel, youtube.com/Mr. Kelstar. Go to that. And follow me on Twitter, at CashKillingAC. Follow Nate, NCAAF, NCAA football, obviously, of KK and AC. So check that out. Follow both of us on Twitter for college football updates and obviously other sports, because that's what we cover. Now we're going to preview the national championship. Mostly Nate's going to preview the national championship. So overall, Nate, what do you think about players to watch and ultimately what you see shaking out in the national championship, which will go down Monday in New Orleans, I believe?
Well, Tim, I wasn't a fan of, after the first meeting, I wasn't a real fan of seeing this game happen, to tell you the truth. I think it's going to be another defensive battle all over again. I just hope Alabama's gotten their sense knocked into their kicker, so maybe he can actually make a few field goals to win the game this time. Ultimately, I see it being a hard-fought battle between Alabama and LSU. I see Richardson running for a good number of yards, Richardson running the ball. And then LSU's quarterback, Lee, is going to lead an offense that has been very versatile this year. But, like I said, the defenses are just going to stand out extremely in this game.
Yeah, and that's obviously what they did in that first game, which was probably the most boring game I've ever watched. You know, I wasn't necessarily excited when I heard this, but I think that these are the two best teams in college football right now, and I didn't see a better option. Oklahoma State had their chance and they lost. Stanford had their chance and they lost. And ultimately, when you only lose by 3 points, I think most people, myself included, thought that Alabama was probably outplayed LSU in that game. But ultimately, it did not work out because they missed 3 or 4 field goals. I forget the exact number. But it seemed to me like Alabama was a better team overall, and LSU's defense is amazing. Don't get me wrong, led by Tyrann Mathieu. But I think that this game could really go either way. Ultimately, I think LSU's going to win this game, but what do you see happening?
I see, like you said before, Alabama outplayed LSU in the other game, and I see that happening again. But I see Alabama's defense playing with a bit more passion, because remember, this is the BCS championship. This is for it all. I see Richardson just standing out McCarron, throwing a few huge passes, and maybe Mays even making some of those catches. But I see Alabama winning, and I see a lot of controversy being stirred up after this one, because that would make Alabama and LSU tied for the year on game.
Yeah, and I think obviously at that point, unless Alabama wins by like 1 point, but even if they do, you normally make the national champion. When you go to vote at the end of the year, it doesn't matter earlier in the year that LSU beat Alabama because they only lost by 3. But even that being said, whoever wins this game will get credit probably as the better team. The question is, with the fact that Oklahoma State had a very good showing in their bowl game, if Alabama wins in a low-scoring game like we had before, do people then... I mean, obviously Oklahoma State's going to get some votes. I don't see them getting enough votes. I think whoever wins the national title will ultimately be made the #1 team in the country at the season-end polls. But what do you think?
I agree with you there, Tim. I mean, there has been some controversy stirring around about Oklahoma State coming up and receiving that if Alabama wins in a close, low-scoring game like that. But I see either the winner of that game taking it or both teams sharing it as co-champions, maybe.
Yeah, I've heard that talked about. I honestly think Stanford was overrated this season. I think Andrew looks very good. I don't think he's this amazing quarterback everyone's saying is going to be better than Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. I think he will be a solid NFL quarterback. But what I've seen out of that team is a very good team. But USC hung with them. USC almost beat them. It was like triple overtime. I saw a lot of teams right with Stanford, and I think that Oklahoma State put on a show. Justin Blackman, I think, is going to be right up there in the NFL with the A.J. Greens, the Calvin Johnsons, the Larry Fitzgeralds, that type. He reminds me so much of Calvin Johnson. But ultimately, I don't think that that Oklahoma State did enough. What they would have had to do basically in that game is completely blow Stanford out, which they did not do.
I completely agree with you, Tim. And commenting on Blackman, I'd like to just bring up the fact Michael James announcing today that he will be going into the NFL draft this year. I thought that was a pretty huge point. I wanted to bring it up on tonight's video.
Yeah, certainly. And so you're gonna go with Alabama in this. I'm gonna go with LSU. We're gonna have to see what happens. Probably Tuesday afternoon we will make a video talking about what happens, recapping the whole college football season unless bigger things go on in the offseason. And if Alabama wins in a close game, we've laid out the scenario of what could potentially happen. Obviously today, Penn State hiring Bill O'Brien, Patriots offensive coordinator. And one thing I want to get in on that, we'll just make this like a total college football video, is that I understand people are upset that he's never been a head coach before and whatever, but you could not bring in a coach that had been a coach in his system. Everyone knew that. Everyone knew you had to bring in an outside coach, and he's worked with Tom Brady. He has somewhat of a draw because he can say, oh, I was coached with the New England Patriots, I worked with Bill Belichick. And while some of the guys haven't had great success, Charlie Weiss was a complete flop. I mean, Josh McDaniels, to me, was not an awful coach when it came to it. I just don't think he had a ton of talent to work with. I think, ultimately, I felt like this entire time that from Joe Paterno to whoever came next, you were going to need a guy who was going to just be a bridge guy to keep this program afloat and get it on to the next guy who could maybe take it to the next level. Because coming off of this, I cannot see them getting enough recruits. With Urban Meyer going to Ohio State, obviously they're on 1-year probation, but then it goes away after 1 year. Penn State's thing's not going away anytime soon.
I can't agree with you more, Tim. I think pulling in O'Brien was a great move by Penn State. And I think he's going to definitely reamp Penn State's football program. And I think he's going to lead them and make them a much more winning team. I think the problem that Penn State fans are having right now is he isn't Joe Paterno.
Well, I mean,
just can't let go of Joe Paterno, I think.
Yeah, I was ready to move on from him as a Penn State fan. I mean, I'm not trying to disrespect what he did. He's probably the best coach in any sport in the history of anything, but
I completely agree there. I'm a Penn State fan too, and I think Joe Pa was one of the greatest coaches in NCAA history. But
you had to let him go after that whole scenario. And it wasn't that he went to most people, it was how he went. And ultimately, they had to do it. They did what they had to do, not necessarily what they probably wanted to do. But, I mean, I've seen guys like LeVar Arrington just be so critical of this, and I don't understand it. Regardless of that, check out our live show tomorrow night. Follow us on Twitter. We're out.